thank very heartily the situation that we as members of society believe in. They tend to work against it as an alternative, platform that people within the community will be giving information to.
What we have been doing in the last 3 days is part of a broader effort over the last 3 to 4 years to implement this policy framework and national action plan. The UNDP has been a partner in this direction. This specific activity is part of a broader project, which is PVE centered. This started with research focused on 6 states. And because we have invested a lot of time and resources in countering terrorism and its implication in the Northeast, it was thought that for the first time, let us consider those states that may not have turned violent, but that share certain pull and push factors, which I realize we have learned here also. How do we take measures to prevent this from happening? And we know that given the UN counter-terrorism strategy, especially Pillar 1, conditions conducive to the spread of terrorism were identified. And indeed, preconceived injustice, perception of human rights abuses contribute to radicalization. Indeed, extremist organizations, if you look at their videos and messages, they have always insisted and pointed that they were unjustifiably attacked one way or the other. While all this may not be true at all times, it sends a serious question: how do we reform our system? So, bit by bit, we have been implementing the policy framework. First objective, strengthen the capacity of MDAs. And this is where the National Security Advisor has been making a lot of effort, given his powers under the Terrorism Prevention Act, to build capacity and training for law enforcement and security agencies. This activity supports Pillar 1, and UNDP is uniquely positioned to support us in this regard. Pillar 2 went into the content of this program, which is to strengthen access to justice, human rights, and rule of law-based approach to counterterrorism. If you look at the action plan, you will see specific requirements, including that for security providers, especially the police, which is the lead agency in law enforcement in-house. So, the content that has been covered by our distinguished professor in terms of investigation, prosecution, mode of arrest, measures and signs of radicalization, all go into feeding our mandates under Component 2 of the PCV plan. And also to appreciate that in all that we do, we must integrate strategic communication as a first-order capability. We realize through research that violent extremist organizations have no weapon other than media and communication. Exactly. So, as a community, as a country, in complete rejection of their way of thinking and belief, we must come together as a state, as a community, and as media personnel to work together. And this is why the NSA has always supported the integration of the media in all programs which we have conducted.
No doubt, violent extremism and other destructive activities of insurgents have had real and direct impact on the enjoyment of human rights in Nigeria. This includes the issue of loss of lives, livelihood, displacements, healthcare, education, and issues that affect water, sanitation, and nutrition. The Commission is particularly glad that through this workshop, we have all of us here played an active role in achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, particularly Goal 16 of the SDG, which seeks to strengthen institutions, strengthen partnership, and with a view to ensuring that we strengthen rule of law and access to justice. As you all go back to your respective commands and stations, please be mindful that you wear two important garments. One, as frontline human rights officers, on the one hand, and law enforcement officials. In this regard, you should try to strike a balance between national security imperative and the protection of human rights in Nigeria, in line with Nigeria's international and regional human rights treaty obligations.
I want to say that the training has been impactful, it has been insightful, we've learned, it is thought-provoking. Before I came here, I wouldn't believe that maybe violating somebody's rights could cause that person to become a terrorist or become radicalized. It didn't came to mind because we do operations. But I'm so happy. As I'm going back as a new person. Born again. Yes.
This program has been very wonderful, very interactive, and we wish that it should continue in future in other states, state commands, and FCT as well. In fact, we want to use this opportunity also to thank the Inspector General of Police for approving this course. In fact, it has been very wonderful. It's a capacity building. If this such course continue, in fact, we will understand each other, and all these abuses of human rights, organizations, security agents will work together in order to avoid violation of human rights.
Who had to be arrested?
Leave my mother alone, don't take my mother. I need to pray. What are the implications of the experience of Jesus?
Perspective will just decline when you have had a more superior touch exercises.
It's about human rights and beyond human rights. Specifically, it's about the relationship of respect of human rights with regard to the issue of prevention of violent extremism. It has been observed that issues of violent extremism are related to non-adherence to human rights, which tends to agitate, persons who have been victims, and they are easily lured and radicalized to join violent extremist groups. And even if they have not joined, you see that they have, they are vulnerable to being lured. So the workshop is, an endeavor to fill the gap, the human rights gap in terms of, its trigger for violent extremism. In other words, to use this avenue and program to create more awareness with regard to the relationship so that adequate measures will be taken. Interestingly and ironically, we have very good human rights laws in the country. The Police Act 2020 is a good example. But even before that, the National Human Rights Commission and other security agencies, there have been courses, even from the UNDP and related multilateral organizations that have been trying to sensitize and create awareness towards this. But the issue is adherence to it, the practical dimension, which I believe is an issue which the stakeholders, particularly the security agents and the law enforcement agents, would need to exercise the will to begin to practicalize all that are in our law books. The adherence to it has not been very good, I must say. And that's why, of course, you can see what happened in the NSAS protest. Interestingly, this gap has been, identified, and this program has been planned before that time, which is a testimony to the fact that that gap has been identified and notified. So there is a need for enforcement of the respect for human rights by the powers there be, so that it doesn't create vulnerability for people who have grievances and who can be easily lured, because that in our environment you see that there are lots of unemployment situations and all that. So it is very important, because the feeling that your human right or human rights are being respected is the very first or basic step towards some kind of fulfillment with governance. And that is why it is very important that the enforcement implemented from the top to the bottom with regard to the police and law enforcement agents and other security agencies.
There. No. They will not see you.
Thank you.